Imagine this. It's Monday morning. The room is quiet. Outside, the sun is just beginning to rise. Jake opens one eye. His alarm says 6:30 a.m. He doesn't feel tired. In fact, he slept well. Next to his bed, everything is ready. His running shoes, a clean t-shirt, a water bottle. Last night, he promised himself something. Tomorrow is different. Tomorrow, I finally start. He really meant it. He wasn't lying to himself. He wanted this. He wanted to become the kind of person who wakes up early, who exercises, who keeps promises, who feels proud at the end of the day. For a few seconds, everything feels possible. Then, his phone lights up. Just one notification, nothing important. Someone posted a photo. A new video appeared. A message can wait. Jake knows that. He tells himself. Just 1 minute. He picks up the phone. 1 minute becomes 3. 3 becomes 10, then 20. The room is brighter now. People are driving to work. The gym is already open. Jake is still in bed. He slowly puts the phone down. He looks at his running shoes. Then he looks away. He doesn't feel lazy. He doesn't feel happy. He just feels disappointed. Again, he whispers to himself, "Why do I always do this? Why is it so hard? What's wrong with me?" Maybe you've asked yourself the same questions. Maybe your story isn't about the gym. Maybe it's English. Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's waking up earlier. Maybe it's simply doing the thing you promised yourself yesterday. Here's the strange part. Most people think this story is about discipline. It isn't. It's about something much deeper. It's about the way your brain learns. And once you understand that, you may never think about discipline in the same way again. Let's stay with Jake for a little longer, because there is something you don't know about him. Jake is not lazy, not at all. Every morning he arrives at work on time. His team trusts him. His manager trusts him too. When there is a difficult problem, people often ask Jake for help. He doesn't miss deadlines. He pays his bills on time. He calls his parents every Sunday. His apartment is clean. His friends like him. If Jake says, "I'll be there at 6, he is there at 6. So, how can the same person fail at one simple promise? Every night, Jake says, "Tomorrow I will go to the gym." Every morning, he breaks that promise. It doesn't make sense, at least not at first. One Friday afternoon, Jake meets his friend Daniel for coffee. They worked together a few years ago. Daniel notices something. "You look tired." Jake laughs. "I keep trying to build better habits. I always start, and then I stop. I think I just don't have enough discipline." Daniel smiles. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he asks a question. "Do you think you're lazy?" Jake looks surprised. "No, I work hard." "I know you do," Daniel says. "So maybe laziness isn't the problem." Jake stays quiet. Nobody has ever said that to him before. Daniel takes another sip of coffee. Then he says something Jake will remember for a long time. "Maybe. Your brain is only doing what it has learned to do." Jake frowns. "What does that mean?" Daniel laughs. "I'll explain. But first, imagine you're walking through a forest." Daniel looked out the coffee shop window. Then he smiled. "Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked through a forest?" Jake nodded. "When I was a kid," Daniel picked up a paper napkin. He drew 2 simple lines. "Imagine this. You walk through a forest for the first time. There are no paths. There are only trees. You have to push the branches away. You have to watch every step. It's slow. It's uncomfortable." Jake nodded again. "I can picture that." Daniel drew another line. "Now imagine you walk the same way every day. For 1 week, then 1 month, then 1 year. What happens?" Jake answered without thinking. A path appears, exactly. The grass disappears. The ground becomes hard. You stop thinking about where to step. You simply walk. Daniel put the pen down. Our brains love paths. They always have. They don't ask, is this the best path? They ask, is this the easiest path? Jake stayed quiet. Daniel continued. Every morning your brain already knows one path. The alarm rings. You reach for your phone. You check a few things. You stay in bed. You've walked that path hundreds of times. Jake looked down at his coffee. So, the phone isn't really the problem? Daniel smiled. Not yet. The phone is only standing on a road that already exists. If the road weren't there, the phone wouldn't be nearly as powerful. Jake thought about all the mornings he had forgotten, every promise, every fresh start, every Monday. It suddenly felt different. Maybe he wasn't losing the same battle every morning. Maybe he had been walking down the same road without even seeing it. Daniel leaned back in his chair. And here's the interesting part. You can build a new road. It won't feel easy, not at first, but every time you choose it, it becomes a little wider, a little smoother, a little easier. Jake looked up. So, my brain isn't trying to stop me. Daniel shook his head. No, it's simply protecting what feels familiar, and familiar is often stronger than motivation. Jake didn't answer. For the first time in months, he felt something strange. Not motivation, not excitement, just hope. Daniel picked up the paper napkin again. He pointed at the two paths. The old path is wide. The new one is still small. But here's something amazing. Your brain can change. Jake smiled. I've heard people say that before. Daniel nodded. Most people have, but very few people really believe it. He drew one more line. Scientists have a name for this. It's called neuroplasticity. That's a long word, but the idea is actually very simple. It means your brain is always changing. It changes because of what you do and what you repeat. Jake looked surprised. So my brain isn't fixed? Not at all. Daniel shook his head. When you were a child, you learned how to walk. You learned how to ride a bike. You learned how to type. You weren't born with those skills. You built them, one small step at a time. Jake laughed. I was terrible at riding a bike. Weren't we all? Daniel laughed too. You probably fell more than once, but every time you got back on the bike, your brain learned something. It became a little easier. Not because you wanted it more, but because your brain changed. Daniel paused for a moment. Now think about your phone. You've reached for it. Thousands of times, maybe tens of thousands. Jake slowly nodded. So my brain thinks. This is normal. Exactly. And your brain loves normal. It saves energy. It doesn't have to make a new decision. It already knows what to do. Jake looked at the two paths again. So every morning, I'm not making a fresh choice. I'm following yesterday's choice. Daniel smiled. That's one way to think about it. And yesterday, and the day before, and hundreds of mornings before that. Jake suddenly became very quiet. He wasn't thinking about today anymore. He was thinking about all the tiny choices that had slowly become automatic. None of them felt important, but together they had built a road. Daniel folded the napkin. The good news is that your brain doesn't care whether the road is good or bad. It only cares whether you keep walking it. Jake looked up. So if I keep walking a new road, my brain will learn that one too? Daniel smiled. Exactly. And that's the part most people never hear. Change doesn't begin when you feel different. It begins When your brain notices that you repeated something, even if it was only one small step. The coffee shop was getting louder. People came in, people left. Daniel looked at his watch. Then he smiled. "Let's try something." Jake laughed. "You have a magic trick." Daniel shook his head. "No, I have an experiment." Jake leaned forward. "What kind of experiment?" "A very small one. So small it almost sounds silly." Jake smiled. "I've tried everything. I'll try one more thing." Daniel pointed at Jake's phone. "Tonight, don't sleep with your phone." Jake laughed. "That's it. That's it. No special app. No motivational speech. No morning routine. No five-step system. Just one change." Jake looked confused. "How can that change anything?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. "When your alarm rings, where is your phone?" "Right next to my bed." "What's the first thing your hand touches?" "My phone." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. What if your hand touched something else?" Jake looked down. "My shoes." Daniel smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe nothing. The point isn't the shoes. The point is this. We're not testing your discipline. We're testing your brain." Jake stayed quiet. Daniel continued. "For years, your brain has expected one thing. Alarm. Phone. Scroll. Tomorrow morning. I want to interrupt that pattern. Nothing more. No pressure, no perfect morning, no promise to become a new person. Just notice what happens." Jake laughed again. "You're making this sound like a science experiment." Daniel smiled. "It is, but the person we're studying is you." The next morning, 6:30, the alarm rang. Jake opened his eyes. Without thinking, his hand reached to the right side of the bed. Nothing. He touched the empty nightstand. For 1 second, his brain seemed confused. He blinked. Then he remembered. "My phone, it's in the kitchen." He sat up. Something felt different. Not easier, not harder, just different. He stood up, almost by accident. His eyes landed on his running shoes. For the first time in weeks, he put them on. Not because he suddenly felt motivated, not because he became disciplined overnight, simply because the old path had been interrupted, and for just a few seconds, his brain didn't know which road to follow. Jake walked outside. The air was cold. He only walked for 8 minutes. Then he came home. No amazing workout, no dramatic music, no life-changing moment. Just 8 quiet minutes. That night, Jake smiled, not because he had changed his life, because he had learned something. His brain could be surprised. The next afternoon, Jake met Daniel again. This time, Jake looked different, not happier, not stronger, just curious. "I don't understand," Jake said. "I only walked for 8 minutes, but it felt easier." Daniel smiled. "Good." Jake looked confused. "Good. I thought you wanted me to exercise longer." Daniel shook his head. "No, I wanted you to notice something." "What?" Daniel leaned forward. "Your brain noticed something new." Jake waited. Daniel picked up a sugar packet from the table. "Let me ask you another question. When you watch your favorite TV show, when do you feel excited?" Jake thought for a moment. "While I'm watching it." Daniel smiled. "Sometimes, but often. The excitement starts before the show. When you see the next episode. When you hear the opening music. When you know something enjoyable is coming." Jake slowly nodded. "Yeah, I guess that's true." Daniel continued. "Your brain has a chemical called dopamine. Many people call it the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right." Jake looked surprised. "It isn't. No, dopamine is more like, get ready, Something important is coming. Jake stayed quiet. Daniel pointed toward the window. For months, your brain expected one thing every morning. Alarm, phone, scroll. It prepared for that. It rewarded that. It became normal. Jake looked down at his coffee. So yesterday, my brain expected the phone, but it wasn't there. Exactly. For one small moment, your old pattern broke, and your brain had to pay attention. Jake smiled. So that's why everything felt different. Daniel nodded. Yes, not because you suddenly became disciplined, but because your brain couldn't run on autopilot. Jake laughed. I've been blaming myself, when maybe I was just repeating an old pattern. Daniel smiled. A pattern can feel like your personality, but it isn't. It's only something your brain has practiced. Jake looked out the window. People were walking past the coffee shop. Some looked busy, some looked tired, some were looking at their phones. I wonder, Jake said quietly, how many people think they are weak when they are really just following an old path? Daniel didn't answer. He simply smiled. Then he picked up his coffee. And that's why real change usually starts with something small. Not because small things are powerful, but because they are easier to repeat. And every repeated action teaches your brain what to expect next. For 3 days, everything went well. Jake kept his phone in the kitchen. He woke up. He put on his shoes. He walked outside. Not every walk was long, sometimes only 10 minutes, sometimes less. But he kept going. On the 4th night, he felt tired. Work had been stressful. A project was late. His manager called twice after dinner. Jake looked at his phone. I'll just charge it here tonight. He pointed to the nightstand. It won't matter, just this once. The next morning, the alarm rang. His hand moved. Before he even opened his eyes, he picked up his phone. News, messages, one video, then another. 25 minutes disappeared. Jake sat on the edge of his bed. He looked at the floor. The running shoes were still there, but this morning, they felt very far away. Jake sighed. I knew it. I haven't changed at all. That afternoon, he called Daniel. I failed. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, what happened? Jake told him everything. The phone was beside my bed again. I wasted the whole morning. I guess the experiment is over. Daniel laughed softly. No, I think the experiment has just become interesting. Jake frowned. What do you mean? Daniel asked another question. Did you notice what happened? Jake looked confused. I failed. Yes, but before that, Jake thought for a few seconds. My phone was back beside the bed. Daniel nodded. And who put it there? Jake smiled a little. I did. Exactly. Daniel leaned forward. You didn't lose because your brain is broken. You returned to the old environment. The old path was still waiting. Jake stayed silent. Daniel continued. If you plant the same seed, in the same place, don't be surprised when the same tree grows. Jake laughed. I've never thought about it like that. Daniel smiled. Most people think one bad day means they failed. I don't. I think one bad day shows you which path is still stronger. Jake slowly nodded. So, I don't need a new personality. I need more walks on the new path. Daniel raised his coffee cup. Now you're beginning to understand. 3 months passed, not 3 perfect months, just 3 ordinary months. Some mornings were easy, some weren't. Jake still missed a few days. Sometimes he stayed in bed. Sometimes work became too busy. Life didn't suddenly become simple, but something was different. One Monday morning, His alarm rang. 6:30. Jake opened his eyes. He sat up. He put on his shoes. He picked up his water bottle. He walked out the front door. Then, halfway down the street, he suddenly smiled, not because the workout had started, because he had just noticed something. He never thought about his phone, not once. It wasn't a fight anymore. It wasn't a decision anymore. He simply walked. That afternoon, he met Daniel again. Daniel looked at him. "You seem different." Jake laughed. "I don't feel different. I still don't love waking up early. I still don't love cold mornings. I still don't feel motivated." Daniel smiled. "Good." Jake laughed. "You keep saying that." Daniel nodded. "Because motivation was never the goal." Jake looked out the window. People hurried past. Some carried coffee. Some were looking at their phones. Some looked tired. Life looked exactly the same. "But I changed," Jake said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, your brain changed. It learned a different road." Jake didn't answer. He watched a young father help his little daughter cross the street. She held his hand. She didn't stop to think about every step. She simply walked beside him. Daniel spoke again. "That's how habits work. The beginning feels slow. Every step needs attention. But after enough walks, the road becomes part of you." Jake smiled. "So discipline isn't something I find." Daniel smiled back. "No, it's something you build." They finished their coffee. They stood up. They walked outside. The city was busy. Nothing looked special. But Jake noticed something. The hardest part had never been the gym. The hardest part had been believing that he could change. And maybe that's true for all of us. Your brain is changing every day. The real question is, which path are you teaching it to follow? Thank you for listening. And until next time, take one small step today. Your future brain is already watching.